First up on Amador this week is Let's Talk with your host, Larry Cenotto.
Thank you for joining us on Let's Talk. This week, let's talk about the Preston School of Industry, celebrating its centennial this year. We've had some events already. I'm sure you've read or heard about it. More events coming up on July 1. We're going to cover all that, including sort of at our halftime, we're going to have a slideshow, and you're going to learn a little bit about the history of this institution in Ione. With us on the program to talk about the Centennial are a couple of employees of the institution, John Lafferdy, the senior librarian, and Jim Vincigura, a teacher. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Let's Talk. Jim?
Larry.
Yeah, that's good. Boy, this is kind of exciting times for Preston, John, isn't it? All this going on? I mean, it must be kind of exciting around there.
I've been looking forward to it for about 14 years.
I can imagine. That's how long you were working on your book. We're
Yes.
going to talk about that a little bit. How about you? Pretty big stuff?
Pretty big stuff for Amador County, Larry. I think it's going to be attended by a lot of people, a lot of old state employees, but a lot of people from our community should come out and check out what's going to happen. It's going to be really fantastic, I think.
All right, Jim, let's stay with you. Well, let's find out a little bit about you. You know, there's so many newcomers out there, you know. I mean, I've only been here 30 years, and I'm still a newcomer, but there's a lot of people out there who've been here a real short time. So, well, two handsome fellows, but maybe I've never seen them before, and, you know, that sort of thing, who they are. Are you one of those kind of rare species natives of Amador County?
Yeah, I'm a rare native.
Yeah, there aren't, I mean, they're dwindling now. We've got 35,000 and maybe only a few thousand are probably natives, probably. I think we've had another member of your family on the program in the past. I think Harvey, he's related to you, isn't he?
Yeah, he's related to me. Yeah, it's my dad.
Harvey Vincigura, all right. And so you're a native, where'd you go to high school?
I went to Jackson High School when it was called Jackson High School.
When it was Jackson. So this was back...
Too long ago.
in the 60s or 70s?
Yeah, late 60s, yeah.
Let's confess, we were remarking about that. I was stunned when you told me that you have been working at Preston for 20 years. Couldn't believe it. You don't look that old.
You're the first one that's told me that.
I doubt that, but I mean, I'm really stunned because I can remember you very well when you were in high school. I think my oldest was probably going to high school at the same time you were, or close to it.
Yeah.
Boy, time's gone by fast. What have you done in the last 20 years?
I've taught at Preston for the last 20 years and try to stay busy around the community, you know, quarterback club, or I'm also on the Juvenile Justice Commission for the county and Italian Society and a lot of organizations that I belong to, and I keep busy, plus my wife and my 3 kids, so 24 hours a day.
All right. What led to your position as teacher at Preston? How did you get there?
Well, I was hurting for a job when I got out of college, like everybody else.
I understand graduates are having that trouble today.
Yeah, and I graduated from Chico State, and I was substitute teaching, and I was going to law school at the time, and a job opened up at Preston for substitute teachers.
Was Chico State really the party school when you went there?
Don't tell anybody, but it was. Yeah. Good time. Yeah. A lot of fun.
He made it the party school.
No more, though. Strictly scholastically inclined now. But,
all right, you graduated and then...
Yeah, and I didn't have a teaching credential. What we had were emergency credentials at the time, and I went back to University of Pacific and finished up my 5th-year teaching credential, and that led to a full-time job at Preston, and I've been there for 20 years.
Was it your intent to be a teacher when you were at Chico State?
Never had it, never crossed my mind. I really didn't know what I wanted to do by the time I was a senior. Law school seemed a logical move, and things didn't pan out, and then things at Preston panned out, and I wanted to kind of stay in the county. I'm kind of homegrown here, and I hope to be here for a lot longer, but it was a good job at the time, and it became available, so I took it.
John, we're going to get to you because we got a lot to talk about it, but I'm going to keep following here with you. What do you teach?
I'm in a specialized counseling program. It's kind of a one-room schoolhouse, if you want to call it that. We have 3 teachers on my unit. There's 42 in my unit, and we deal mostly with sex offenders and violent criminals, and they're kind of apart from the mainline population. And we offer them high school diploma. We offer them employability skills, what a regular high school type student would take, that type of curriculum.
Is this a team teaching thing with three of you? Or?
Well, we are called a team, yes, but I have an individual classroom.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many do you have normally in the classroom?
My max runs about 12 to 14, and depending on...
My wife would love a ratio
Yeah.
like that, teaching at Ione Junior High.
Yeah, being a specialized program, you're allowed to have a lesser amount in attendance, but the main schools go up to 17 in the mainline situation at
Is
Preston.
it in the interest of the wards to study, pay attention, study?
I think it has to be.
Well, I mean, do they?
Yeah, we have a real good success rate as far as recidivism, as far as getting the ward a high school diploma. As far as gaining vocational skills, the program that I'm in doesn't allow it because they're in intensive treatment. Okay, large groups, small groups. We have a psychologist. There's a psychiatrist for 2 units, and it's intensive treatment, and they really aren't allowed to do a lot in the vocational area.
All right.
So their main goal is a high school diploma.
Give us a rough idea of what you're doing anyway. We get John here into the conversation. Senior librarian. All right. How do you become a senior librarian in the Youth Authority?
Well, senior librarian is a state classification. And first you have to be a librarian. And to be a librarian, you have to have a master's degree in library science.
So you answered my questions. I wasn't sure whether you really had to have...
Okay, I earned a master's from UCLA in 70-71 and went right to work at Camarillo State Hospital, where I worked for 9 years. And I heard about an job offering at Preston. And the first time I turned it down because I'd never heard of Ione, California. And
Or Amador County,
no.
as far as that goes.
And there was a lady that I worked with whose son works at Preston. And I mentioned it to her, and she said, "Oh, you should have gone up there. It's a beautiful place." And 5 months later, they still hadn't filled the position. So I went up for an interview on Thanksgiving vacation. And they told me I could have the job, so I said, "I'll take it." And that afternoon, we went out looking for a house, and the 5th house we came to, we bought. So it was an exciting weekend. And
How long have you been senior librarian now?
for almost 14 years now.
Ooh, I must confess that I have never been to your archives or your library down there, and I sure want to. Tell us a little bit about it. What do you have there?
Okay, it's a pretty small library of about 5,000 books, and it's run in conjunction with the school program.
So the wards can come in and check out books?
The wards come in each period. They can come from a classroom, or the lodges can send them down. And they can check out books, or we have newspapers from all over the state. We have a good selection of magazines. Telephone books from all over the state, so they can look up their friends and families.
Probably, I'm guessing that your love may be this Preston Archives, that you're also custodian of. And archives being the records of any institution. We have the county archives, which actually has a lot more besides county records, so that name might not be exactly apt, but I think in your case it's probably perfectly apt, isn't it? It's the records of the Preston institution?
Yeah, it includes not only official documents such as biennial reports and superintendent's reports, but somehow over the years we've collected letters, oral histories, diaries, that kind of thing, and it all fits together.
How many photographs do you think you have?
Oh, probably 400 or 500.
What do you spend most of your time doing? Now that the book's out, we're going to get to that in a moment, but, you know.
The basic operation is to keep an eye on the wards and to help them find the books that they want. And teachers send them down to do research, and so I'm helping them find materials for their studies.
Are wards in there basically all during the day?
Yes, we have 4 periods a day, just like the classrooms. And I have as many as 18 for each period.
Okay. Probably one of the big events, my judgment, and I think anybody's judgment of this Centennial of Preston, is the fact that your book came out this year, and from what I hear has been a resounding success. Somewhere back 14 years ago or thereabouts, you had this dream, I suppose, of I think maybe I ought to write a book about Preston, and by gosh, it happened this year. Tell us about that.
Well, it wasn't too long after I started work at Preston when the superintendent, Jim Embry, approached me and told me about this room that was stacked full of boxes of old documents, pictures.
So you didn't know about it when you took the job?
No, I didn't know anything about that.
Oh.
And so I jumped at the chance and just jumped in and started going through it all. And it was totally disorganized. It was like somebody had dumped out a box of 5,000 puzzle pieces. Not only that, but there was no picture to go by, so I was just looking at all these individual pieces. And since I was new to Preston, I really didn't know anything about the history of the school. So I just had to start going through it piece by piece, and gradually it started to come together.
When did the book start forming in your head, or actually? When did you start writing this book?
Well, as I was going through these documents, they were so fascinating that I started sharing them with friends and co-workers and family. And they were excited about it too, and they kept telling me, you know, you ought to put this down in a book because it's too good to keep to yourself. And it sort of just evolved from that.
How long ago did you start on it? I read it 11 years ago.
Yeah, it was 11 or 12 years ago. Actually, it was 1981.
That's when you first started writing, and my gosh, it came out this year. That is a tremendous achievement. How did that work out? I know you have a copyright of the book. Did Preston kind of help put it out, or how did that work out?
Well, I spent a lot of state time. You know, when the wards weren't there asking for help, I was busy going through these materials and typing my notes. And I did a lot of work at home, not because I had to, but it was just so exciting that I wanted to.
So some state time involved, obviously a lot of your time involved. The actual publication was produced by Preston?
It's produced by the school, published by the school. And so they have all they have the rights to it.
They have the rights. I understand it's selling extremely well.
Well, we printed 1,100 copies, and we just sold over 800, so they're going pretty quickly. I think another month, and they're going to be gone.
Another thing, since the book has come out and all this talk about the Centennial, I understand that a lot of other items and photos and memorabilia are flowing into you.
I think people are really catching the Preston history bug, and they see what can be done with it and how it can be shared with other people. Just a couple of weeks ago, a gentleman in town brought me 50 photographs from 1906 that are just absolutely fantastic and just fills in a big gap.
So the book coming out has been a major event. Another major event was the capsule opening, and we're going to get to that after the slideshow, because we've already pretty well gone out about time on this one, so we can talk about the capsule opening and also about events coming up in part 3. So gentlemen, get your scripts and everything ready, or whatever. Our subject this week, the Preston School of Industry Centennial. We promised you a slideshow where it's coming up with our two guests, John Lafferty and Jim Vincigura. Jim, one question before we start. How many times have you guys given this show leading up to the Centennial?
It's been given over 60 times throughout the county. It's been seen by probably over about 2,500 people,
Is that
3,000
right?
people, yeah.
All right, give me the scripts, then you must know it by heart.
No way.
All right, there we see this John Lafferty. When was this photo taken?
That dates from around 1905, 1906.
Let's briefly, does the script talk about the Romanesque architecture that we're watching here?
No, it sure doesn't.
Some state experts said that this is the best example of Romanesque revival architecture in the state of California. So that's what
That's it.
All right, gentlemen,
Not too many left.
start your show. Start your engines, and then start your show.
Yeah.
Okay. The Preston School of Industry officially opened its doors on July 1st, 1894. Prior to this, juvenile offenders, such as this 15-year-old, were confined in San Quentin and Folsom prisons, where they were forced to mingle with hardened criminals. On January 29th, 1889, Senator Edward M. Preston introduced Senate Bill number 402, which proposed to establish a state reform school in Folsom, next door to the prison. Senator Preston was born in Michigan in 1841. While at college in Michigan, he had seen the good work done by the State Reform School for Boys located in Lansing. When he became a member of the California legislature, he set out to have a similar school established in California. When the proposed legislation was returned to the Senate from committee, a few changes were immediately obvious. Introduced by Senator Anthony Caminetti of Jackson, the school had been renamed the Preston School of Industry, and its location had been moved to Ione.
Boy, the politics involved in that must have been something. I don't suppose we have time to get into it now, but one day we will.
I hope so. The amended measure passed the Senate and Assembly and was signed into law by Governor Robert Whitney Waterman on March 11th, 1889. The following day, the Sacramento Union reported, Ione, Amador County. The town is wild with excitement over the governor's signature to the reform school bill, locating the school here. Bells are ringing and cannon booming, and everybody is happy.
Did they take old Abe down to Ione, or for heaven's sake?
There were quite a few of them around the county that
Actually, Ione had their own cannon at that
Really?
time.
Oh, that's interesting.
In fact, it was moved up to the castle where it stayed for about 40 years, and it was finally melted down during World War II.
I'll be darned. Hey, that's something you better write about.
I'll have to get to that. Advertisements were placed to purchase the land and water rights necessary for the school, and a prime 300-acre parcel was purchased from the Ione Coal and Iron Company. The plans for Preston's administration building are modified copies of the plans of the State Reform School in Red Wing, Minnesota. Excavation was begun on September 20th, 1890, and work progressed so well that the cornerstone was laid on December 23rd, 1890. Some 2,500 people attended the event, including Governor Waterman. Several items were placed in a time capsule within the cornerstone, where it remained undisturbed for 103 years until it was opened on June 1st, 1994. The plans called for an administration building 160 feet long, 50 feet wide, and 3 stories high above a basement. It would also feature a tower 148 feet high. Due to some budget problems, the building was not completed until May 1894.
Did the tower serve any purpose?
Well,
I mean, really? I mean, they didn't have watchmen up in the tower, did they?
I think it was mainly an architectural feature. They did plan to put clocks in those circles halfway up the tower. It was used as a signal tower when boys escaped. They had to send out horsemen to find them, and in order to communicate, they would use signals from the tower.
Okay, so it did have use.
Well, a lot of questions we got when we were out in the community doing the presentation, Larry, was how big is the castle? And if you did, or you do stand in front of the castle and look up, it's immense. We tried to figure it out in the library a few weeks ago. We figured about 80,000 plus square feet. So
all empty, right?
All empty.
On June 18th, Governor Henry Markham issued a proclamation declaring the school officially opened on July 1st, 1894. The school actually received its first awards 2 weeks before the official opening day, when 7 inmates were transferred from San Quentin Prison. They ranged in age from 16 to 18, and their committing offenses consisted of grand larceny, burglary, and robbery. The commitment order for Preston Ward Number 1 shows that he was originally sentenced by the Fresno County Superior Court to San Quentin Prison for a term of 5 years, and was sent from there to the Preston School on June 13, 1894. As you can see by these happy faces, the boys were overwhelmed with joy at being so honored. If you could see the boys' uniform buttons more closely, you could see that the larger buttons depict the administration building, and their sleeve buttons read PS of I. The school officials were very proud of their new building, and even their dinnerware featured an emblem of the administration building.
This was probably the first corrections or youth authority or reform school that ever, it was called a school, wasn't it? School, that was a unique feature of this. It was a school.
Let's see.
Did I still?
Well, the Whittier School for Boys opened at about the same time.
Okay. This was kind of new, though, that it was a school. They were really going to be taught something just instead of imprisoned.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay.
Go ahead.
When the school first opened, the administration building housed the superintendent and most of the staff, the kitchens, dining halls, sitting rooms, the boys' dormitories, the assembly hall, library, and classrooms. In short, the entire school. From its very beginning, the school consisted of 3 departments: academic, industrial, and military, and each boy received training in all 3 areas. Each boy attended school in either the morning or the afternoon. The other half day was spent learning a practical trade in which the boy might find employment when released from the school. A trades building was completed in 1895. Some of the trades included printing, laundry, tailoring, shoemaking, and agriculture. As part of this vocational training, the boys did all the work about the buildings and grounds and began what would soon be an extensive farming program.
Where was the farm in relation to the new golf course?
On the same site.
That's
quite a bit of it.
Quite a bit of it.
Yes.
That's what I thought. All right.
In the military department, the boys were taught daily in marching and other military drills, consisting of a 20-minute exercise every day at 6 a.m. and a dress parade every Sunday. They used wooden guns made in the school's carpentry shop until they were able to obtain real Army surplus Springfield rifles, with the firing pins removed, of course. In July 1895, the board authorized the purchase of musical instruments for a school band.
The band goes back clear to 1895.
They'll celebrate their own centennial next year.
Yeah. Dexter will be there,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
For another 100.
The tradition of the Preston School Band has continued uninterrupted to this day. In addition to their schoolwork, vocational training, and military drills, a portion of each day was set aside for recreation. These boys called themselves the irrigation engineers. No matter what the season, they always managed to get a ball game of some sort together. As part of their vocational education, the boys actually constructed some of the new buildings at the school. They did everything from manufacturing the concrete blocks to raising the roof. These boys are celebrating the last load of blocks. And this is the finished product. Everything having to do with the construction of the building, from the excavation of the site to the erection of the flagpole on the roof, was performed by the boys under expert guidance. The school gained a beautiful new building, and the boys gained several valuable skills, not to mention the pride and satisfaction of seeing and enjoying something which they made with their own hands.
Is that building still there?
The upper story has been taken down, but the basement, which is hardly visible on the left, is used for storage.
Okay.
Valuable clay deposits were discovered on the property, and the wards were soon put to work manufacturing brick, which was used in constructing some of the buildings, including east and west cottages and the refectory building shown here. An improvement greatly appreciated by the boys was the swimming pond, known as the Preston Plunge, complete with bathhouse, slide, and diving board. It was just the ticket for a hot summer day. Most of the food consumed at the school was produced on the Preston farm. The boys grew food for themselves and feed for the livestock. The farm was quite an extensive operation and provided all the meat, poultry, and produce used by the school. All the improvements about the school were done by the boys, sometimes as part of a disciplinary work squad. But work was just part of the training program, and there was time set aside each day for academic studies.
Does the library look like that today? Or is it the same room?
A little bit different, a little more modern. Military drill. And recreation. And occasionally, even the staff got a well-deserved day off.
And that body of water, that's what, Henderson Reservoir up on Mule Creek?
Oh, that's right.
All right. That's a good, refreshing time to pause for a moment. We'll be right back in our special program about the Preston Centennial. More slideshow coming up. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Our show this week, the Preston School of Industry Centennial. Our guests, John Lafferty and Jim Vincigura. We're in the midst of a slideshow about the history of Preston, which actually began in 1889, if you missed the first slide. So I think we're ready for part two of our show here, and Jim, take over.
We'll give it a shot. One of the most interesting periods in the school's history was when Calvin Derrick became superintendent at Preston in 1912. He introduced a system of self-government, an idea which was enthusiastically adapted by the wards. The companies formed their own governments, they wrote their own constitutions, they passed their own laws, called it the Preston School Republic. They elected their own president with other officials, judges. Eventually the companies formed a union known as the Preston Republic. If they were found guilty of crimes, chances are you were put here. This was part of the self-discipline that was enforced at the school. This is called a lockup cell. I guess you'd call it a lockup cell now.
It wasn't imposed by the authorities, really?
It was imposed by the wards, yeah. And in John's book, he mentions the fact that I think they were in here for about 20 days at a time. And you can see it's double bunked. This is a heck of a shot. We take a lot of time to explain what it is.
What is that, a 6x8 room, or what is that?
I don't think it's even 6x8.
It looks even smaller than that.
Boy.
But that's what it looked like. That was solitary confinement at the time.
And they're complaining about Pelican Bay, huh?
Yeah. But anyway, this self-government lasted only 4 years. Fortunately, if you were a big guy, chances are you didn't have to do time. If you were a smaller, younger person, chances are you were the one that was put in the cell.
Now, a historian, John, we would look at that photograph and immediately look at that train and say, you know, Amador County had passenger train service from 1895 all the way up to Martel, 1876 to Ione. And, you know, we kind of take it for granted. We don't have it anymore.
This is another one of Calvin Derrick's endeavors. He wanted the wards to go pick berries, and they were allowed like a summer vacation. They went to Sebastopol from Preston. They were given a train ride into Stockton, where they caught a boat, went up through the Delta and into Sebastopol.
Incredible.
So you see another picture of him here boarding the train in Ione. And here's two of the young gents ready to go to Sebastopol for their berry picking. They camped out, did their own cooking.
Yeah, anybody that young these days goes somewhere else. They don't go to Preston, right?
Correct. These are pretty young young wards, yeah. This is John's favorite picture. This starts his book, but they were allowed to take a doll with them on their trip and their luggage, and that was about it.
This boy was known as Little Joe.
I'll be darned. That's interesting.
This is a picture taken on Easter morning in 1911, kind of a New England type setting, and we wanted to put it in just to say that there's cold weather at Preston School every once in a while. East and West cottages were built in 1900 and housed some 200 boys each, which you can see one in the background there. This slide was taken. This is one of the buildings right now that still remains at Preston, Larry. It's called the Colonial, and I think it was built in the early 30s.
1911, actually.
Geez. 11? Okay, I screwed up. I'm sorry. Anyway, it is still standing. This is taken from the castle down at the picture we just saw, a day at Cenotto at Preston.
Oh, gosh.
And the building on the far left is the one that is still standing, called the Colonial. It's on Palm Drive next to the superintendent's mansion.
Do we have a photo in here of Caminiti Hall?
Yeah, yeah, we've got one.
All right.
In our travels, everybody wanted to know the size of the wards that we have. The guy on the right's about 6'4", he's 17 years old.
Yeah.
And the guy on the left is 4'6", and he weighs 60 pounds, and he's about 13 years old. So they come in all sizes.
In a program we just did recently, something similar, and I said, you know, Mutt and Jeff.
Yeah.
And this person was so young that they'd never heard of Mutt and Jeff. It made me feel pretty old.
But that's kind of a neat picture. We enjoy showing that. The kids in the schools that we showed the program to really enjoyed this one. During World War I, the military training program took on an added meaning. Boys contributed to the war effort in many ways. About 148 actually fought in World War I.
And so, I mean, when they got out of that, they were out. They were on their own. They didn't come back.
Chances are for an early parole, that was a parole consideration. They served with honor, 5 of them giving their lives, and 7 were severely wounded. So we did have casualties from Preston School in World War I.
Never heard about that.
Yeah. In those serious times, the boys didn't lose their love for sports. This is one of the earliest pictures we have of a baseball team at Preston.
About when? Do you have any idea?
That's 1919.
This guy must be a historian. He seems to know all this stuff.
Yeah, I just kind of give the presentation. It's a picture of a football game. I know that. At one time, Preston School and Ione played Sacramento High School. They played teams from Stockton. They played Jackson High, Sutter Creek High School at the time. They even played a football team from Berkeley. And Berkeley came up, and unfortunately Preston lost. I think it was about 20-13, but Preston could give a college-type team a good game. And the band played on. It's getting a little bit bigger there. It was a good time to live and work at Preston. This is taken off an actual postcard. And the boys were allowed to send postcards out to parents, friends, whatever. These are 2 teachers in the early 20s in the what you would call, I guess, the dress of the day.
You can see the military flair, influence from World War I.
During the war, the school's agricultural program was more important than ever, just because of production. Production was at an all-time high. As you can see, the amount of produce that they grew right here on the farm. You can see pork, like 21,000 pounds of pork within a year.
What do they mean? Okay.
If you go over on the right-hand column, you see dozen eggs, 84,000 dozen eggs. Okay, 24,000 pounds of tomatoes makes a lot of Italian spaghetti gravy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we put that in just to show what that farm could produce at its height.
So it was a real place. It wasn't just kind of make-believe. They really
I think the
produced a
boys
lot.
especially enjoyed the 1,000 pounds of beets you see
Yeah.
there. The automobile came to Preston, and with it a new trade, auto maintenance and repair.
About when is this?
This is 1923. The school is constantly evaluating the usefulness of its vocational programs and adds or deletes programs in order to train the boys in careers in which they are likely to find employment upon their release from the school. In the 1920s, shoe repair was still a viable option, as were culinary arts and several other trades offered at Preston at that time. The construction program was greatly expanded in the early 30s, and several new buildings were erected, including the school and hospital.
That's the Caminetti
On the left
building
there.
you were talking about.
Caminetti on the left?
Yeah.
After the senator whose bill got Preston for Amador County. Okay.
That hospital on the right is still in use today. And here's the new refectory building. In those days, it was called the Officers' Dining Hall, and it's now used as the employees' cafeteria. And if you ever come over for a visit, we'll have lunch. They call it the feast program now.
Sounds like a plan to
Okay.
me.
This aerial photo of the school in the 1930s
Oh, that's neat.
shows the Preston School as a mix of old and new buildings and a portion of the farm program. The institution at that time had expanded to 1,000 acres, most of it used for cultivation and pasturage. The farm at that time was stocked with 120 cows, 350 pigs, 30 horses, and 3,000 chickens. This photo shows a project undertaken by the carpentry shop, listing the names of the men from Ione who were at that time serving in the armed forces. Many of these men had or would later work at the Preston School.
This is World War II.
Yeah, 1942. In June 1941, the California legislature adopted the Model Youth Corrections Authority Act. As a result of this legislation, a program known as the Youth Authority Unit was established, and the California Youth Authority took root and grew from this program established on the grounds of the Preston School.
Did they have a 50th anniversary celebration for Youth Authority a couple years ago?
I believe they did.
Okay, I missed
Yeah.
it.
For 52 years, Preston was operated as an open institution, but in 1946, the school was enclosed within a 12-foot chain-link fence topped with concertina, or razor wire.
That's interesting, that all that time it was an open one.
Escapes used to be a big problem. I mean, you can see why, with no fence even around the institution. Farming and animal husbandry were still a major part of the school's vocational program. Some of the boys are shown at the 1948 Amador County Fair with some of their prize-winning dairy cows. The horticulture department is responsible for most of the trees shown here. Superintendent and Mrs. Close were credited with having collected a number of foreign and uncommon trees and shrubs, many of which are still present on the grounds, including a rare deciduous redwood near the boys' dining room. In 1954, the older living units were replaced with modern, fireproof structures. Other new buildings shown include the Chandler Gymnasium and the new school building and vocational shops, seen at the bottom left.
Other new construction included a program center, where part of the administration is housed today, a psychiatric treatment unit, actually two, and the school is in the middle.
And that's where Jim works, incidentally.
We put that in to say that, I guess.
He's not treated. He
I'm not
works
treated.
there.
I get to go home at 4 o'clock, yeah. And a new administration building. This was taken out of Tower 1, the big tower at Preston, and everybody kind of wants to know what it looks like up there, and as you can see forever. Kind of a neat to take a camera up there and do your thing. At the same time, the academic program received increased attention. This year, 1960, will be remembered the year that the administration building was finally vacated and the year in which the military program was ended.
Is that why the flag is at half-staff? Because Preston is vacated or something else occurred?
Somebody must have died. I don't know the history of this picture.
The old administration building, it's now referred to as the castle, was now outside the fence. It's completely encased in its own fence out there.
When was this nickname, the castle, first used, John?
I think it started cropping up right around 1960.
Oh, that late? Oh.
Yeah, originally it was called the administration building, or sometimes it was referred to as the main building. Mm-hmm. But not until the 60s did they start, I think with the Save the Castle committee.
Yeah, okay.
At this same time, the academic received increased attention. Majority of the boys are assigned either all-day school academic programs or a half-a-day vocational program and a half-a-day school. Plans were made, as you can see, to raise the castle until a committee of concerned citizens within the Ione area stepped in and put an end to the idea.
When was this? 70s, was it? 74, somewhere in there?
Yeah, right around there, 73.
Okay.
Time took its toll on the old building, however. By the early 1980s, its roof was collapsing from the ravages of weather and years of neglect. State grants and local fundraising paid for reconstruction of the roof in 1985. Many later-to-be famous wards passed through the gates of Preston School. There were actor Rory Calhoun, whose real name was Francis McGowan, and his name is actually scratched into one of the bricks at the base of the castle. Eddie Rochester Anderson, the notorious red light bandit Carol Chesman, who wrote a bestseller, Cell 2455 Death Row. He was also at Preston. As you can see here, a guy named Merle Haggard.
Incorrigible.
Yeah.
Well, that proved wrong.
He was there
didn't
when he was about 14 years old, I think.
I came across his school file, and under hobbies it says he likes to sing and play the guitar. So I
No
guess they had it
kidding.
right.
Found his niche at Preston.
You don't claim that he learned to sing and play at Preston.
I don't know about that.
No,
He did. He did enjoy it at that time.
Yeah.
This is an author, Bill Sands. His book was My Shadow Ran Fast, founder of the 7th Step Rehabilitation Program for ex-offenders. Another author, Phil Thatcher. Boxers, Eddie Machen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Don Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Did I mention Pancho Gonzalez, the great tennis
Pancho
star?
there? Oh, for
yeah.
Christ's sakes.
Anyway, if you make it to our open house, this is some of the scenery that you're going to see. Of course, the castle will be available for tour. Some of the living units. This one was built in the 1930s. This was the bottom floor is the hospital. The top floor is actually a dormitory. The total grounds within the confines of the fence. The feast dining hall, that's everybody's favorite spot to go, especially mine. Also, we have a cemetery at Preston. There are 17 wards buried here. One grave is unmarked. We're going to start the Centennial with a memorial service starting at 9 o'clock on July 1. The carpentry shop at Preston has made all new grave markers for the wards that are buried there, and it's going to be a solemn ceremony, but it's going to be a nice, a nice beginning to a fun-filled day.
We'll talk about that a little bit more in our next part.
And that's kind of what it looks like at nighttime at Preston School, and the bats flying around the castle.
What a marvelous view that is. And an opportune time for us to break. We'll be back for the last segment of our special program on the Preston School of Industry's Centennial. Our subject this week, Preston School of Industry and its Centennial, which we have experienced. There's still more to come in this segment, and we're going to be talking about that with John Lafferdy and Jim Vincigura. great slideshow. Who put it together? That was one of your jobs
I'll
as
take credit for that one.
senior librarian. How long did it take you to put? I mean, you got all these photos, and you got to select them, the script. That's a major job.
It was 1 or 2 days, actually.
1 or 2 days to do that?
It actually took 1 day to put a slideshow together, and then it was a little bit long, trying to cram 100 years into a program. So we cut out a few.
Tell me what computer software you use if you did that in 1 or 2 days. I mean, I want to know about it.
Microsoft Word.
All right, it would be redundant in a way to talk too much about the capsule and the cornerstone. I mean, that's sort of past, but I think we can probably make some reflections about that now, looking back at it, and maybe we can cover some aspects that haven't really been covered. What do you think of this experience of opening up this capsule that was, now when was it planted again?
In December of 1890.
1890, so 104 years later. Mr. Historian, Librarian, what'd you think of that?
Oh, pretty exciting. Some of the people that were there complained that some of the items weren't terribly exciting, and I have to agree. There were a lot of different state agency reports, like the insane asylum and that kind of thing.
You know, we must confess there was probably 3 or 4 of them about this is the report of the directors of the state insane asylum. The next one, this is the report of, and I wanted to say, and where's the report of the inmates of the state insane asylum? But that one never did show up. There were a few, but, well, it's a state institution, right? So that predominantly the stuff that was put in it.
And if you remember that the Preston School wasn't opened yet, it wasn't even built. And so you're not going to find any Preston memorabilia in there, except for the plans for the castle.
And the Cornerstone program itself.
And the original legislation that established the school.
What was the most significant thing from your point of view that was in the capsule?
First of all, the plans of the castle, which have been lost for many, many years.
No set anywhere else?
We tried everywhere, including the Department of the State Architect, and they've just disappeared off the face of the earth.
So that was the only one in there.
And what's significant about having the original plans is there have been so much remodeling over the years of the castle, and so we'll be able to look at the way it was the day it opened.
All right, besides the plans, what else struck your fancy?
Another thing that's very interesting to me was a report by the state prison directors. Now, as soon as the bill was passed establishing the school, the state prison directors went back east and toured all the major reform schools and gathered ideas for the Preston School. And so I'm anxious to take a look at this document and find out what features they liked and which ones they adopted for use at Preston.
That document wasn't available anywhere else?
I've heard of it. I've seen it cited, but I've searched the state library and the archives, and it's gone.
Jim, as a layperson or as a teacher, what impressed you the most about the capsule, or what was in it?
I think the neatest thing was when Pete Pojo from Jackson actually jackhammered it out of the corner. Out
of the corner,
out of the corner,
unsealed it.
Yeah, didn't unseal it. He brought the box out, but on top of the box there was a kind of like a tin plate, and they lifted the tin plate off, and here was the program in blue with black ink, hardly faded at all, and that simply it amazed me. You know, readable, just like it was brand new. So it had to be airtight.
All right. Tough question. Why is Preston celebrating a centennial when the darn institution dates from 1889 when the bill was passed, and naming it that?
Well, it just took us 5 years to get ready for it. Actually, the school was officially opened by proclamation of the governor on July 1st, 1894, and so we took that date. And
most people and organizations I know are trying desperately to make themselves as old as possible. So here we have an institution that dates back to '89, and they're saying '94 is their
Well,
anniversary.
actually, if my book had been ready, 4 years ago, we might have been able to celebrate it earlier.
I heard someone else slightly complain that, gee, I would have loved to watch the capsule, but it was held, during the day on a weekday. How was I going to get there to see it?
Actually,
Was this mainly for Preston?
well, the reason we opened it a month ahead of time was so that the state archives could prepare these items. As you know, something that's been sitting around for 100 years can get a little brittle. And so right after that was opened, two archivists took all the materials to the state archives in Sacramento, where they're opening everything and cleaning them under controlled conditions.
Are you under the direction of the state archives in any way in your job?
No, I've just recognized a long time ago how important they are.
Who decides what stays at Preston and what goes to the state archives?
I think it'll be...
I mean, generally,
well,
not the capsule, but just generally.
okay.
You've got records, what goes off and what stays.
Well, it's up to us to make the decision. The Preston School can decide what we're going to keep and what we'd prefer them to have. I don't think we need to have the state asylum reports. And so things we're not interested in especially we'll give to them. But also a few items that are especially valuable, like the blueprints, that really belong in the state archives, where they'll be kept and preserved. And we'll get copies to use at Preston. But this way they'll last for another century.
Another thing that came up, and I've kind of written a little bit about it myself, is the symbolism of the castle. And people can look at the castle in different ways, and it can be a symbol of good or a symbol of, not good. What do you think?
It's really funny how through the centuries you have such a divergent point of view from different people. In my book, there's a quote from a Los Angeles newspaper in 1900 that refers to the school as a black and filthy blot upon the map of the state. And yet, a month later, someone else can come in and just praise the work being done at Preston, all the wonderful things that are happening there. Even the castle itself is open to a wide view of opinions. Carol Chessman, in his book, referred to the castle as an ugly brick building squatting on top of the hill. And yet there was a newspaper reporter came in right about the same time and described the castle as like a little university, and talked about the beautiful buildings and the rolling hills. So I guess it depends a lot on your point of view.
How about yours, Jim?
I think it's the point of view taken, good or evil. The intention of Preston School is to rehabilitate and educate, and we try to hold on to that tradition.
Can't argue with that. It's
Right.
good symbolism. A couple of questions I overlooked when we were talking about the capsule a moment ago. I want to make clear, there was, I forget how many items were in the capsule, but quite a few. All of them going back in the capsule and going back in somewhere. Tell us about this. What's going in, what's not going in? Is there a new capsule, new things going in?
Okay, a new capsule is being constructed right now by Emmett Baxter, who, if you saw the program last week, he's the one that chiseled the thing open.
All right.
And we're going to replace it with quite a few new objects, including a copy of the book.
All right. You picking these out? You and help?
I've made a list, and we've also sent out a memo to staff inviting them to make recommendations.
State archives involved in that at all? The new capsule, what's going on?
They're going to probably advise us the best way to preserve these items.
Okay. When is the new capsule going to go back in?
On July the 1st.
That's going to be one of the events.
12:30, it's going to be quite a ceremony.
When is it going to be opened? Is that going to be stipulated, or is that up to the future to...
It could be 50 years or 100 years, we don't know.
Jim, let me turn to you. A lot of events still coming up on July 1, the actual Centennial date. What's happening that day?
Quite a number of things.
Is the public invited?
The public is invited to everything.
To everything.
Everything that's happening that day, the public is very welcome.
And it starts at 10 and ends at 8, so at least even if you're working,
if you're working on Friday, you have till 8 p.m. in the evening to get over and catch a tour or whatever.
All right. What's happening that day? Read the schedule there.
Well, we start with the memorial service, like I said, at 9 o'clock in the morning at the old cemetery. It's actually behind the Forestry Academy.
I didn't know they even had a cemetery until just watching this program.
Not too many people do.
You kind of wonder, wards are in there, but they came from somewhere. You think if they died or whatever, they would be, shipped back home, be buried at home. But here we have some that weren't.
As John was saying, a lot of them were from out of state. The cost was kind of prohibitive. A lot of them didn't have families. That was the bottom line. I mean, with no family, there was no place to go but Preston. And they died there.
I suppose over the years, 100 years, and only, how many did you say?
18.
That's, I suppose, really not too many.
Well, the first one was 1895, and the last one was 1929, so it hasn't been used in some time.
Okay. So we have that, then what?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is going to be the castle tour. A lot of people from our community have seen the castle but have not actually been in it.
I've never been in it.
No, they gave a staff tour, I think when Cal Terhune was the past superintendent. That was 15 years ago, and I think it's been locked since then.
But in the 60s, when they took everything out of it, I mean, what
there
was
wasn't
left?
much to see.
Yeah.
But we've had Mule Creek State Prison involved, the inmates from Mule Creek, in renovating 2 of the big rooms on the main floor of the castle. They've actually come in and replastered and patched and painted and got electricity into it. John's in charge of kind of furnishing one area. I think we're going to furnish it with some antiques. What the castle looked like in its heyday. So all the people in the community that actually want to go in and see what the castle was like, that's going to be their chance.
Is this leading toward this going to be a museum one day? Do you think that's what's going to happen?
I don't think that building will be the museum, but we are talking about a museum on the Preston grounds.
What's that building going to be used for? Is that a political question?
It hasn't been decided
All
yet.
right, go on with the schedule.
Anyway, besides the castle, the superintendent's mansion, where the superintendent was supposedly housed, will be available for a tour. That's just down the street. I was mentioning earlier, there's quite a display of antiques in there. There's also a Steinway grand piano, and it's appraised at thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. That's still there, and
that's on the tour.
A heck of a piece of furniture. Anybody can go to the superintendent's house.
Doesn't live there anymore?
It's occupied. It's occupied right now. Yeah.
By the superintendent?
No.
The superintendent has the option of living there,
all right.
and he's out of town.
Okay.
And
but it is occupied.
So it is occupied.
All right.
You'll also get tours in air-conditioned buses of the regular grounds right now. You'll be able to see lodges. You'll be able to see some schoolrooms. You'll be able to see vocational education at work. And July 1st rolls around. It could be 110, and we decided to go with the air-conditioned buses that we're renting. We're going to have a luncheon barbecue, and that's going to last from 11 in the morning till 7 in the evening. The cost is very minimal for anybody that wants lunch. We're having tri-tips and chicken, barbecued chicken.
What is that minimal cost?
About $2.50.
Pretty
What
minimal.
it costs us to put it on is what it costs the people. So there's also going to be a special postage cancellation with the name Waterman. Waterman was a post office in Ione, and Mr. Martinelli in Ione is kind of coordinating that. So there'll be a special cancellation on that day only. Centennial souvenirs will be available. We've got the T-shirts and the caps and, you know, the sweatshirts. A thing that may be real interesting is we're going to reproduce the button with the castle on it as a tie tack or a cuff link. So that'll be available. And if any of John's books are still available July 1, we're going to have books. Other than that, we've had a lot of participation by the wards at Preston. We've had a track meet, we've had door decorating contests, we've had talent shows. The wards built a float that has been in the Ione Parade and the Italian Picnic Parade just this last week, and it did get first place, so we're proud of that. The slideshow went to a lot of people. We've been trying to get the word out.
Yeah.
It's got into a lot of schools.
Has the wider community taken part in this, or is it basically the Preston's celebration? I mean, is the county, the city, have they been involved in this?
Well, not really. It's been a Preston endeavor, but we want everybody to be there to share it, you know. And
I'm talking about the whole celebration. Have we had community participation in things up to this point?
We've actually gone out to the community and offered the slideshows and anything we can about the history of the Preston School.
But they're starting to reciprocate too. The Amador County Fair this year is,
Right.
What is the theme?
Castle in the Hills.
Castle in the Hills.
Yeah.
Hey.
On the day of the Centennial, we're going to have quite a few entertainers from the community singing, playing music.
I think I saw at the capsule opening there was somebody's class from the Ione School was sitting there, which must have been quite a thrill for them.
Mrs. Finch's class was, she took it on as a history project for 6th grade in Ione. Most of the pupils within the county have seen it. We've done the shows at Ione Elementary. We actually had a poster contest and poetry contest in the elementary schools and the junior high in Ione. We've been to Jackson Elementary School for a couple assemblies. We've been to Argonaut High School through the history classes and Mr. Davis. It's been around. I'm getting hoarse talking about it, but hopefully the kids got a little bit of history, local history.
Pretty extensive goings on. We hope that the public will come out. The day again, John?
July the 1st.
July the 1st, that is the Centennial
That's
for
D-Day.
Preston School of Industry. From 8 till late, huh?
8 till late, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
actually from 9 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night.
And bring 2.5 and they can eat and virtually spend the day there doing all kinds of things.
We hope to have a good turnout. I think we will.
Yeah. Anything we didn't cover, gentlemen?
You might mention that as part of the historical display, we're going to have all the items that were taken out of the time capsule so people can get a close-up view.
Any of those going to be at the fair? Or is all that going to be taken care
We're
of
going to
by
wait
the fair?
till July 1st before we start. We're going to wait till that's over, and then we'll start worrying about the next project.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Let's Talk. Really
Thank you.
enjoyed this. Quite a program.
Sorry.
Slideshows. Not every time that we get a slideshow like that. It's so interesting. Thanks once again. This may be the last one you have to do.
Hopefully.
Our guests, John Lafferty and Jim Vincigura from the Preston School of Industry, celebrating its centennial officially on July 1. Why don't you attend some of the events? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Well, stick around unless it's 11:45 a.m. or p.m. because there's more of Amador This Week coming up